everyone, I'm David Scranton. Dispelling myths, dispelling rumors and misinformation is an ongoing battle for financial advisors. And estate planning is a topic especially prone to myths, starting with the belief that it's only for the rich. And on today's show, I'm going to play Mythbuster to 10 common myths about estate planning. Specifically, we'll cover myths about who does and who does not need an estate plan. Myths about estate planning and what it is and what it isn't. Myths about the process itself, about what happens when you neglect estate planning, and on and on. So let's start with myth number one. I'm too young to need an estate plan. Well, statistically, that statement may be closer to true if you're in your 20s or 30s, but only because the chance of you dying at that age is less than if you're older. But the bigger problem is that a lot of people still believe this statement into their 50s. And therefore, a lot of those who intended to create an estate plan eventually ended up dying before they get a chance to do so. And the result is often a legal and emotional nightmare for their families. Myth number two, only rich people need an estate plan. Well, technically speaking, an estate is defined as all the property owned by a particular person. So in other words, if you have property or assets of any type, then you have an estate and you need an estate plan. Because your estate essentially includes things like savings accounts and investments, but it also includes your home, boats, cars, collectibles, and even items of sentimental value. So now let's talk about some myths around what an estate plan is and what it's for. Moving on to myth number three. An estate plan is just about assets and property, right? Well, that's wrong. Why? Because estate planning is also very much about emotions, relationships, and deeply personal matters. In fact, in my experience, that's really the greatest risk of not having an estate plan. It's not the legal or financial chaos that often ensues, but the emotional fallout. And I've personally seen families absolutely torn apart by arguments over who gets what, or over what to do with a parent on life support. So a comprehensive estate plan could have prevented these arguments, which leads us to our next myth, myth number four. As long as I've got a written will, then I'm all set. Well, a will is a good start, but you're still missing many important documents, and your simple will may or may not be legally binding. You need to be sure of that, which leads us to myth number five. And that is, estate planning is only concerned with what happens with my assets after I die. Again, wrong. Why? Because estate planning is very much about helping you protect and grow your assets while you're alive. Now, in fact, the very definition of estate planning is the accumulation, preservation, and ultimate distribution of assets. Next, let's examine some myths about the process of estate planning. So moving on to myth number six. Estate planning is expensive and I'll need a lawyer right from the start. Well, I wouldn't say to do it without a lawyer, totally. But the truth is, if your family and financial situations are fairly simple, you can draft many documents yourself at little or no cost. And there are resources available to help you online. Now, having said this, let's address myth number seven. I don't need a lawyer at all. Well, I would say wrong. Sure, you can obtain and draft all these documents yourself, but there may be problems or complications with some of your directives that only a qualified estate planning attorney would recognize. So to be safe, it's smart to at least have an attorney review them and let you know if changes should be made or additional steps should be taken. Here's the good news. Many financial advisors who specialize in income planning have professional relationships with estate planning attorneys, essentially partnerships on behalf of their mutual clients. And that helps ensure that the back end of the estate plan, of the part about preserving and ultimately distributing assets, aligns properly with your retirement income strategy in an overall sense, because that is extremely important. Next, let's dispel a few myths about what happens when you die without any type of estate plan in place. So we'll start by dispelling two conflicting myths, which are myth number 8. If I die without a will, my spouse or partner will automatically receive all my assets. Or the contrary to that, which is myth number 9, if I die without a will, the state will get my money. Here are the facts. If you pass away without a will, the state you live in will apply its what we call laws of intestacy to determine who gets what. Okay? And in each state, it's different. Now, jointly owned property, like your home, usually passes to the other living owner without going through the probate process. But other assets might be unavailable to your spouse or partner during probate. Or they may end up being distributed to unintended beneficiaries, such as a spouse from a previous marriage or maybe financially irresponsible children. You can learn more about your state's laws of intestacy. How? By checking out the website airbase.com. And that's air, H-E-I-R, airbase.com. And there it'll give you some idea of how your assets might be distributed if you were to die in a particular state without having a will. Because if you don't like the outcome, and I'm sure you probably won't, please use that as motivation to draft one. If you're fine with the outcome, you're probably 1 out of 100. Well, you know what? Draft a will anyway, and use that as a starting point to creating a full, comprehensive estate plan for all the reasons we talked about. And please do it now. Which leads us to myth number 10. Estate planning is only really important after I retire. Well, you probably guessed it, wrong again. Why? Because estate planning is not a process that you should be saving for the future. It's a step you take to help you prepare for the future and to better ensure that your wishes are met and that your assets are well protected in the meantime. And now it's time to bring in today's guest to help us. First, we have Jeff Small, president of Arbor Financial Services, a retirement income store located in Melbourne, Florida. And Jeff, I know you're fired up today because you said, Dave, for next week, I want you to get a guest who's a TV star on PBS. And did I deliver or not?
I think so, but I'm here too, Dave, so I got some clout as well.
Absolutely. So now it's time to bring in our television star from PBS, and that's today's special guest, Ed Slott. He's an author, public speaker, and yes, a television host. He's been called the best source for IRA advice, as well as America's IRA expert. Ed, it's great to have you here again on the Income Generation.
Great to be back with you guys. Yep.
Ed, we know that a good financial plan can be wrecked by a poor estate plan, but the two often cross-pollinate with each other because of taxes. And so where are the glaring holes and what should consumers be concerned about when it comes to taxes, like in IRAs, Ed, your wheelhouse, and estate planning?
Well, I think the big problem is people have not paid attention to estate planning because we have these huge exemptions. $12 million a person, $24 million a couple. So most people think, oh, good. They tune out about estate planning. It doesn't affect me. Yes, you may not pay estate tax, but that's a different tax than income tax. Income tax, you and your beneficiaries will pay if you have, just like you said, an IRA, a 401k. Never forget, that money has not yet been taxed, and your IRA money is included in your estate. Even if your estate is not large enough to be subject to estate tax, the income tax will still have to be paid. And now, after the Secure Act, your beneficiaries may end up paying a lot of that in a shorter time frame, like a 10-year rule. And we even had new rules come out a few weeks ago where beneficiaries may be shocked to know that some of them may have to start taking money out as early as the year after death.
So, it's great. You highlighted one of the biggest misconceptions I think about estate planning is most folks think that, well, estate planning is only for the rich. I'm not rich. I don't need an estate plan. And obviously that's incorrect. But what are some of the biggest drawbacks? I know you mentioned one, the income tax part of death. But give us some other major drawbacks for those who die before they have an estate plan.
Right. Well, part of it is, again, like I said, some of the reasons people don't pay it any attention because of the large exemption. The other reason is that you got to remember there's two different kinds of assets or money people have. IRA money and 401k, tax deferred money, and your regular, maybe a bank, broker, investment accounts. Let's say you have a stock account. that gets a step up in basis. So your heirs will not pay any of the income tax on the appreciation during your lifetime. But that's not true. Once again, IRAs are heavily taxed assets. That's why they're not good assets to use for wealth transfer or estate planning. They never get a step up in basis.
Yeah,
So
not good assets, not good assets to die with, right, Jeff?
no.
They're terrible assets to die with. And I think when we look at estate planning, we don't want the government to be our partner. And so, Ed, what would you tell our viewers and our listeners today on what they should do to pass tax-free assets on instead of taxable? Because the Secure Act made it even more taxable because now they've got to pay out those IRAs and 401ks to non-spousal beneficiaries over 10 years. So what would you say to our viewers and listeners?
You're right. Secure Act made IRAs even a worse. They downgraded IRAs as an estate planning vehicle by eliminating the stretch IRA. People were okay with that, the so-called stretch IRA, because they knew their beneficiaries could defer the tax taking small distributions for 10, 20, 30, 50 years. Not anymore. So Congress purposely made IRAs a lousy estate planning or wealth transfer vehicle. They felt in the Secure Act that IRAs and your retirement accounts should only be for you, not your inheritors. So they made the taxes a lot more cumbersome for your beneficiaries. So what do? Well, Roth conversions can help because at least you have the same 10-year rule, but at least it will be tax-free. And when I say tax-free, again, not estate tax-free, income tax-free. The Roths will be both actually estate and income tax-free if your estate is under that limit. And another option, which I write about in my book, you might have noticed a couple of copies laying around, is the power of life insurance. Now, I do not sell life insurance, but to me, indirectly, Congress upgraded the value of using, and I'm talking about permanent cash value life insurance, instead of leaving IRAs, maybe take some of that down at today's low rock bottom rate. Same thing with a Roth conversion, maybe a super Roth conversion where you use it to fund a life insurance policy that can give you lifetime benefits, say a long-term care rider. I have that for myself. And then you have the big tax-free payout, income tax-free payout for your beneficiaries. It may turn out to be better planning than you had with the stretch IRA. All I think Congress did is shoot themselves in the foot. All they did is wake us up, incentivize us, and motivate us to do the better planning with life insurance that we probably should have been doing all along. Life insurance has now, in my opinion, moved to the top of the list as the wealth transfer and estate planning vehicle.
Sure. I mean, tax-free death benefit's always been the case, and that's one of the things that they'll probably never change. But one of the things that I worry about them changing, and it's been batted around Congress, and when I talked to you about a year ago, you said, I don't think it's going to happen, but I want to see if your opinion's changed. Because dead people don't vote. So here, it's the easiest place to raise taxes. So what I'm referring to is if they hurt the tax haven of the IRA as a beneficiary-driven tool, then who's to say they're not going to get rid of the step up in basis?
That'll never happen. I stand by. By the way, I said that as they were plotting to do that on your program, if you remember. And I said that'll never happen. The step up in basis has been in law for over 100 years. It was 100 years old last year in 2021.
Okay, but Ed, playing devil's advocate, how long have people been able to stretch out IRAs as beneficiaries? Pretty much as long as IRAs have existed. Am I wrong?
Right, but there was not the constituency before. Remember, if they mess around with step up in basis, and they found it when they tried to do it just a few months ago in some of the proposals, they realized it was hurting a lot of unintended targets, like homeowners that have, especially now in this real estate market, that have these huge gains, but it's just really inflation and appreciation, and small business owners where they have all their money tied up in property, plant, equipment, all these things. It was falling on all the wrong targets. And that was the same thing that happened. So again, I stand by what I said. They'll never touch the step up in basis. It affects too many people and too many congressmen.
You know, it's funny with my only fear, Ed, my only fear is with the deficit where it is, the national debt where it is, I think eventually they're going to have to do something. But you're probably right that It may not happen during our lifetime.
It won't be
So-
on the step up in basis. They will raise income taxes again, which makes IRAs and 401ks, anything tax deferred, a lousy planning asset, subject to the uncertainties of future higher taxes. Remember, Congress knows we made that deal. That's why that could be changed. That was our deal with the devil. We took all these deductions up front, knowing there would be payback, as with any deal with the devil. So we already signed up for that plan. So the IRAs are the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, well, don't make a deal with the devil. Good advice for sure. Jeff, Ed Slott, thanks so much for being here with us on The Income Generation.
Great,
Great
thanks.
to be here.
Thank you for watching today's video, 10 Common Mistakes About Estate Planning. If you enjoyed it, please click the thumbs up button to give us a like, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel for new content each and every week.